I never imagined the day would come when I'd call my own brother an enemy. All my life he was my partner, my reflection, my best friend. Together, we turned our father's small business into something great, everything our dad had ever dreamed of. But time and money have a way of revealing what the heart tries to hide. After our father passed away, something changed. He became different, distant, reserved. At first, I didn't notice, until one day I realized the numbers didn't add up. Money missing, fake contracts, hidden accounts. And there he was, my own brother, stealing from the company we built together. I confronted him. He didn't deny it. He just said, "I had my reasons." But what are reasons when love has been betrayed? The argument was violent, shouting, tears, slamming doors. I could have taken him to court. But what would have become of our family's name, the name our father left behind, if it ended up in the headlines? So I chose silence. I walked away, moved to another state, and swore I'd never see that man again. 10 years. 10 years without a single word, a single call, a single Christmas together. Until the day the phone rang, and a trembling voice told me he was gone. In that moment, I understood something I never had before. Time doesn't forgive, and the forgiveness I denied my brother became the same forgiveness I begged God to give me. Before we continue this story, I want to invite you to subscribe to Loved Grace and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your words help this message reach more hearts. My brother and I were always different, but we were inseparable. He was the bold one, the one who made quick decisions. I was the cautious one, the one who planned, analyzed, and weighed every risk. Together, we were the perfect balance. We grew up in a home where work was sacred. Our father, a strong, determined man, built his business with his own hands. He started small, just a modest workshop, and turned it into a respected company. We admired him deeply. Everything we did was to make him proud. When he passed away already old, he left behind more than an inheritance. He left a legacy, and we, his sons, promised to carry that dream forward, together. For the first few years it worked. The company grew, the contracts multiplied, and people called us the Golden Brothers. It was beautiful to see. And for a time, I truly believed nothing could ever come between us. But success is deceptive. It speaks softly, wins you over slowly, and changes the heart before you even notice. It was after our father's death that things began to shift. His eyes didn't look the same. Conversations became rare. Decisions grew colder. He started working alone, signing documents without me, skipping meetings, avoiding contact. At first I thought it was grief, that he just needed time. But little by little, something inside me began to suspect. The numbers didn't match. Deals were made behind my back. Old accounts disappeared. Suppliers complained about late payments. One night, after weeks of unease, I decided to go through everything myself. I spent hours digging through reports, receipts, records. And there it was. His name. Fake signatures. Hidden transfers. My own brother. Stealing from the company we built together. The ground disappeared beneath me. I sat in the office chair, staring at the wall in silence, trying to understand where we had lost each other. I remembered the promise we made at our father's funeral. Nothing will ever separate us. And right there before me was the proof that we had already been separated for a long time. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He simply lowered his head and said coldly, "You wouldn't understand. I did what I had to do." "Had to?" I shouted. "Had to steal?" He looked up, expressionless. "I kept things afloat for years. You have no idea the pressure, the debts, the people involved. It was survival." I couldn't listen anymore. Anger, shock, heartbreak, it all came crashing down. I called him a traitor. He called me a hypocrite, said I judged him without knowing anything. Words became weapons. "You stained our father's name, and you hide behind his memory because you never had the courage to be better." And just like that, what was once love turned into hatred. When I walked out of that room, I knew something inside us had died, and yet I couldn't turn him in, because no matter what he had done, I couldn't bear the thought of seeing my brother behind bars. So I stayed silent. I sold my share, left everything behind, and moved to another state. Started over. New job, new life, new routine. I got married, had children, and tried to erase the past. But there are things time can't erase. 10 years went by, and even from afar, every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the same man. Not a winner, but someone who had lost what mattered most. A brother, a family, a piece of his own soul. Sometimes I thought about forgiving him, but pride whispered, he doesn't deserve it. And maybe that was true, but what I didn't know was that one day I would be the one begging God for forgiveness. 10 years. 10 years without hearing his voice, no phone calls, no messages, no holidays together. I kept telling myself I was at peace, that the past was behind me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't true. Sometimes I dreamed of him, not about the fight, but about our childhood. 2 boys racing through the garden, competing to see who would reach the gate first. I'd wake up with a heavy heart and pretend it didn't mean anything. Until that morning. It was a regular Tuesday. The sunlight poured through the kitchen window. My wife was making coffee. My kids were getting ready for school. I looked at them and thought about how life had gone on, how everything seemed normal. Then the phone rang. The sound sent a chill through me. I don't know why, but something in me already knew. When I answered, the voice on the other end was trembling. It was an old employee from the company, a man I hadn't seen in years. "I'm so sorry. There's been a tragedy." From there, the words began to blur. Heart attack. Sudden. He didn't make it. The ground vanished beneath me. I remember the cup slipping from my hand, coffee spilling across the floor, my wife's terrified look, and me, repeating the words, trying to make them make sense. My brother died. The silence on the other end was the confirmation. An emptiness swallowed me whole. It wasn't just sadness. It was as if time itself had stopped, and everything I'd buried for years came rushing back. The words from our last argument echoed in my head like a nightmare. "You stained our father's name. You only care about yourself." I remembered the anger, the rage. But what truly hurt were the words I didn't say. I never told him I missed him. Never told him I still loved him, despite everything. And now there was no time left. The funeral was 2 days later. Going back to that city after so many years felt like walking through broken glass. Every street, every building, every corner held a piece of our story. The company still carried our family's name, but to me, it looked like a tomb made of glass. When I arrived, people looked at me as if they'd seen a ghost. No one knew what to say. I walked slowly, my heart caught in my throat. And then I saw him. The coffin, surrounded by white flowers. My brother. The man I loved, admired, and hated in equal measure. My legs trembled. I approached, placed my hand on the coffin, and felt a coldness run through me. I wanted to speak, but no words came. Only tears. And there, for the first time in years, I prayed, "Lord, if you've reached him, please tell him I forgive him. And that I need to be forgiven too." But even as I spoke, my heart cried out, "It's too late." In that moment, I felt the crushing weight of a guilt that time could never cure. I went home with a shattered soul. Didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't talk to anyone. People tried to comfort me, but no one could understand. Because the worst kind of regret is the kind that never finds an answer. Every night I sat on the porch and looked up at the sky, hoping for something, a sign, a presence, anything to let me know he knew. Sometimes I thought I heard his voice. Sometimes it was just the wind, and with each sunrise, the emptiness grew. My wife tried to console me, but even she began to drift away. I became distant, silent, cold. My children could feel it, even if they didn't understand. I told everyone I was fine, but inside, I was dying a little more each day. And it was in that silence that I realized something terrible. I wasn't just grieving for him. I was grieving for myself. Because I had let pride destroy what love had once built. And when pride finally fades, all that's left is a heart that begs to turn back time. But time never turns back. That was when I began to run from God. I stopped praying, stopped reading the Bible, stopped believing he could still hear me, because I convinced myself that someone who couldn't forgive in life didn't deserve to be forgiven after death. And that lie, whispered by the enemy, almost destroyed me. But the love of God, it finds us, even in the silence of our guilt. The days that followed were the longest of my life. I'd wake up, drink my coffee, take my kids to school, and pretend everything was fine. On the outside, I looked the same, impeccable suit, firm posture, steady eyes, but inside, I was nothing but ruins. My brother's death wasn't just the loss of a family member, it was the death of a part of me. Every memory became a wound, every silence felt like a sentence. At night, I'd lock myself in my office alone, staring at an old photograph, the two of us as young men, smiling beside our father. And every time I looked at that picture, the same question pierced through me. Why didn't I go after him? 10 years. 10 years when I could have called. 10 years when I could have sent a message. 10 years when I chose pride instead. And now, all that was left was regret that hurt with every breath. My wife tried to make me see reason. You have to forgive yourself, she'd say. Your brother made mistakes, but you did what you thought was right. But it wasn't about right or wrong. It was about everything that got lost in between. I didn't want justice. I didn't want punishment. I just wanted peace. And I couldn't find it anywhere. I tried to fill the void with work, with routine, with my kids. But nothing worked. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'd hear the wind against the window and swear I could hear his name. Other times I'd dream he was knocking on my door with that same old smile saying, "It's over, brother. It's all right now." I'd wake up crying and spend the rest of the day hiding my swollen eyes. It was as if regret had taken on a body, a ghost I carried everywhere I went. Not the ghost of death, but the ghost of forgiveness denied. As the weeks passed, I started avoiding people. I stopped going to church. The Bible gathered dust on my nightstand. Every time I looked at it, shame filled me, because I knew what it said about forgiveness. I knew the verse, "Those who do not forgive will not be forgiven." And I couldn't bear those words. So I shut my heart. But God, He has a strange way of finding us. One night the rain was pouring hard. The house was silent. I sat on the couch, turned off the lights, and let the sound of the rain fill the room. That's when I found an old letter from my father, tucked inside a book. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting shaky in the final lines. It said, "My sons, what I built with my hands may fade one day, but what I built with the love between you, I hope that lasts forever." I read those words over and over until my tears blurred the ink. It felt as if he was there, reminding me of what I had forgotten, that the true legacy wasn't the company or the money. It was love. That night, I knelt for the first time in years, but no words came out. I stared at the ceiling, trying to pray. God, I don't know what to say. The silence was so deep it hurt. I know I've failed, but I don't even know if you still want to hear me. No answer. Only the sound of the rain and my own sobs. That was when I finally understood what it means to feel far from God, not because He walked away, but because I was the one hiding. For many days I kept trying to pray, sometimes out loud, sometimes only in thought. And slowly, something began to change. It wasn't a voice, it wasn't a miracle, It was a feeling, as if someone was holding my heart, whispering without words. I'm still here. I didn't understand it at first, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Fragile. Silent. But real. I cried like a child. For the first time in years, I cried not from guilt, but from relief. And there, in the middle of the night, I said, God, I couldn't ask him for forgiveness, but if you've reached him, please tell him I love him. At that very moment, the wind grew stronger, and the curtains moved, as if someone had just passed by. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe it was an answer. From that night on, something began to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly. The weight was still there, but it no longer crushed me, and for the first time in a very long time, I wanted to live again. After that night, something inside me shifted, though I couldn't explain what it was. I kept living the same routine, the same job, the same house, the same silence. But there was one difference. When I looked up at the sky, it no longer looked empty. It was as if something, or someone, had moved back into my heart. At first, I thought it was just emotion. But as the days passed, that sense of presence grew stronger. I started praying again, first with fear, then with surrender. I'd whisper, God, I don't want to run anymore. And it felt like the silence I'd lived in for so long was being replaced by something gentler, a peace that didn't come from me. That's when I began visiting a small church near my home. I'd slip quietly into the back row and just sit there, listening. One evening, the pastor told the story of the prodigal son. I'd heard it since I was a child, but that night, it was as if every word was being spoken directly to me. When he said, the father ran toward his son before he even asked for forgiveness, I broke down. Because in that moment, I finally understood. I didn't need my brother to be alive in order to forgive him. Forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. For so long, I believed forgiveness depended on the other person. But I had forgotten that true forgiveness is born in the heart that surrenders to God. That night when I got home, I knelt down again. I didn't ask for anything. I just said, thank you. Thank you. Because even after all the hardness, God still came looking for me. And with my eyes closed, I felt something I can never fully describe. As if a hand rested gently on my shoulder. Warmth, light, presence. And I heard, not with my ears but with my soul, a gentle voice saying, you are my son too. And I wept. I cried for everything, for the words spoken, for the ones I never said, for the hugs I never gave, for the years I had thrown away. I cried until it felt like God was collecting every tear himself. That night, a thought came to me. A thought that changed everything. The forgiveness he never heard. God carried it to him. I can't explain it, but I believed it. And with that faith, the weight I had carried for so long finally began to lift. In the days that followed, something beautiful happened. I began talking about him again to my children. I told them stories about our childhood, our adventures, our laughter. Before I couldn't even say his name. Now speaking it felt like a prayer. Each memory stopped being a wound and became something warm, a part of me restored. It was as if God was giving my brother back to me, not in body, but in peace. One day, while driving, I felt the urge to visit the cemetery. It had been years since I'd last been there. I bought simple flowers, sat by the grave, and stayed in silence. The wind was soft, and sunlight broke through the clouds. I didn't say much, just closed my eyes and whispered, I forgive you. And if you can hear me somehow, please know that I still love you. At that moment, a small bird landed on the headstone and just looked at me. It might sound foolish, but I knew it was an answer. I didn't need words. Just that moment. I went home with a peace I had never felt before. And that's when I realized what God had been trying to teach me all along. Forgiveness doesn't bring back the one who's gone, but it rebuilds the one who remains. And when I placed my past in God's hands, He began to place my future back into mine. From that day forward, I started truly living again. I learned to laugh with my wife, to play with my children, to dream again. I still cried sometimes, but the tears were different now. They weren't pain, they were healed longing. And in that mix of tears and peace, I finally understood, love doesn't die when the body does. Love is eternal, because love comes from God. After that day at the cemetery, my life was never the same. There were no visible miracles, no voices from heaven, no sudden transformation. The change came slowly, like sunlight spilling through a window at dawn, quiet, steady, and impossible to stop. I still woke up early, drank my coffee, and took my kids to school. But now, every small gesture carried new meaning. When I hugged my children, I remembered how long I had gone without hugging my brother. When I spoke to my wife, I tried to truly listen, not just respond. When someone hurt me, I took a deep breath before reacting. I learned that loving is much harder than hating. Hatred is easy. It only requires pride. Love demands humility. And I had spent a lifetime being proud. Now, for the first time, I just wanted to be free. I began visiting my parents' graves more often. Not only my brother's, but theirs too. Sometimes I'd just sit there in silence, thinking about my father's letter. What I built with my hands may fade one day, but what I built with your love, I hope it lasts forever. Those words became my prayer. One day I felt the urge to write. I took a blank sheet of paper and began to pour out everything my heart had carried for years. Not to publish it, not to show anyone, but to give my words a place to rest. I wrote about guilt, about pain, about love, about God. And when I finished, I realized the tears falling down my face were no longer tears of regret. They were tears of gratitude. Life had taught me forgiveness in the hardest way possible, but also in the truest way. For years I believed forgiveness meant forgetting. Now I knew, to forgive is to remember without anger, to look at the past and see a scar, not a wound. My faith began to grow again. I started going back to church, this time sitting up front, heart open. One Sunday, the CE pastor said something I'll never forget. God doesn't erase the past. He transforms the past into testimony. And that's when I decided to tell my story. Not to gain pity, not to look strong, but so that someone, somewhere, carrying the same burden I once carried, could understand that there is still time. Time to forgive. Time to love. Time to come home to God. Since then, I've learned not to let pride speak for me. When something hurts, I talk about it. When I make a mistake, I apologize, because now I know how heavy unspoken words can be. Sometimes I still dream of my brother. In the dreams he doesn't speak. He just looks at me and smiles. That same smile from before, the one from when life was still simple. I wake up peaceful, with a strange sense of calm, as if he had come just to say, "It's all right now," and it is. Today, when I look back, I see two different lives, the one I lived before forgiving, and the one I began after. The first was heavy, full of pride, fear, and silence. The second is light, even with its scars, because where guilt once lived, there is now grace, and where pain once ruled, there is now faith. I learned that God doesn't demand perfection. He only asks for an honest heart. And when we give him that heart, broken, tired, imperfect as it is, he returns it to us in the form of peace. Today, I teach that to my children. I tell them, Love before it's too late. Forgive quickly. Say I love you without shame. Because time passes, and what remains isn't what we keep, but what we give. Life took my brother from me, but gave me something money could never buy. The awareness that forgiveness is the most silent and powerful miracle there is. And somehow deep inside I know this, that on the other side, he's at peace too. Time has passed, but the memory of that chapter in my life is still alive. Not as pain, but as a reminder. A reminder that pride is a prison, and forgiveness is the key that opens the cell. Today, when I look back, I don't see failure. I see purpose. Because it was in pain that God found me, and in guilt that He taught me about grace. For a long time, I believed forgiveness was something you gave to those who asked for it. But the truth is, forgiveness is a choice, a quiet decision not to let bitterness consume you. I learned that God doesn't ask us to understand the past. He invites us to trust that the past can still be transformed, and mine was. Sometimes I still miss my brother, not with sadness, but with a gentle kind of longing. I miss our childhood, our laughter, the conversations left unfinished. But now, when I think of him, I don't feel guilt anymore. I feel peace. And deep in my heart, I know that peace comes from God. There was a time when I asked, Lord, why did you let him leave before I could ask for forgiveness? Now I understand. God didn't take my brother to punish me. He used his absence to teach me that forgiveness is the greatest act of love a human being can offer. And that withholding forgiveness is denying the very love of God Himself. I couldn't change the ending of our story, but God showed me that He can always write a new beginning. That's how I found my voice again, talking about God's love, little by little, in conversations with friends, at family dinners, in prayers with my children. Sometimes people ask me, how did you manage to move on after everything? And I always, say the same thing. I didn't. God carried me. Because only God can take a heart in pieces and turn it into a testimony. Only He can take guilt and turn it into compassion. Only He can take pain and turn it into the road that leads to faith. Today, I understand. The greatest miracle in my life was not the forgiveness I received, but the forgiveness I learned to give. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it completely changes the future. Life is too short to wait for the right time to love. Sometimes, the right time is now. Sometimes the reconciliation you think is impossible is the very one God most wants to bring to life. And even if that person is no longer here, forgiveness is still possible, because forgiveness is spiritual. It transcends time, body, and death. It reaches heaven. And it's there that God turns what seemed lost into something eternal. Today, when I close my eyes, I can see my brother smiling. Not like the last time I saw him, angry and distant, but like before, smiling for real. And I like to believe that he forgave me too. Because in the end, we were just two imperfect men who each learned, in our own way, that love is greater than any mistake. And that is the greatest truth God ever placed in my heart. Forgiveness doesn't bring back the one who left, but it rebuilds the one who remains. Today, I walk lighter. And if there's one thing I want to leave with everyone who hears this story, it's this. Don't wait for time to teach you the value of forgiveness. Forgive now. Love now. Say what needs to be said, while there's still time. Because one day, life can change with a single phone call, and all that remains is what you did with the love you were given. And if that love was real, then nothing, not mistakes, not distance, not even death, can erase it. Because love comes from God, and what comes from God is eternal.